Hello and welcome to the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. My name is John Shipley. I'm your host and beat reporter, and I've been your beat reporter covering the Jacksonville Jaguars for On SI every single day since August 2019, and we're continuing to march forward through another offseason together. As always, you can always find our 100% free 24/7 boots on the ground coverage of the Jacksonville Jaguars every single day when you follow us on social media such as Facebook and Twitter at Jaguars on SI. You can also find us at www.si.com/NFL/Jaguars. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. Today, we are going to talk about, it was an interesting article from ESPN Plus. They did something on looking at every single move that the NFL team should make before the offseason ends, whether that's signings, extensions. Jacksonville Jaguars, that maybe I'm being tough because I'm looking at this team through a local lens each and every day, and because this writer had to focus on all 32 teams, well, I just focus on the Jacksonville Jaguars each day. To me, focusing on that singular team each day is a much different role. It's also probably a much easier role. I can know this one team intimately as opposed to being expected to know something, and in many cases, most to all things about all teams. It sounds like an unforgiving job. But with that said, whenever I see things from big networks, I just think this doesn't quite pass a sniff test or make sense for Jaguars' intended purposes. I want to at least give it the benefit of the doubt and look at it from an objective point of view. So, to me, looking at this entire question, it's tough for the Jaguars because they've already done so many moves this offseason. Now, really, what else is there to make? What's one more move for the Jaguars to make? They completely remade the offensive line, completely remade the receiver room, completely remade the tight end room, completely, remade the secondary, made the biggest trade in draft franchise history, one of the biggest trades in general franchise history, etc. Brought in a lot of guys on both sides of the ball, brand new coaching staff, brand new front office. The Jaguars are like the most brand new team of the season. So, really, what else is there for them to do? They are not like other teams on this list, such as the Pittsburgh Steelers have a relatively obvious one. Extend TJ Watt. And the Jaguars are just in a different scope than the rest of those. So it's tough to even answer the question for Jaguars purposes, in my opinion. But to their credit, they did so. ESPN, they said, what's one more offseason move the Jaguars should make? And it was sign edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney. They said, quote, the Jaguars have a strong pair of starting edge rushers with Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker, but there are questions about the depth behind them. Emmanuel Ogbah is 32 years old and had just 5 sacks as a full-time starter in Miami last year. Miles Cole had no sacks on 11.3% of defensive snaps as a 7th-round rookie. The Jaguars could use a third strong edge rusher who can rotate with Hines-Allen and Walker, and there are a number still available on the market. I'm picking Clowney over Matthew Judon, Preston Smith, or Zadarius Smith because his strength setting the edge on run plays makes him a good sub for Walker specifically. Now, in a different universe, I do see this. A couple years ago, it seemed like the Jaguars were set to potentially add Clowney. But the Jaguars just went through the last several off seasons not addressing the backup defensive end spot at all. That is no longer the case. And that, to me, is just what makes this so tough of a sell to really buy. The Jaguars, there was no mention of adding DeJuan Smoot or Dennis Gardeck. And I know neither one of those players are of the name recognition or quality maybe of Jadeveon Clowney. But I'd say those two guys probably factor in more than, say, a Miles Cole does. And that's why, to me, it's just an example of why listening to your local coverage, who's boots on the ground, has their ears to the ground every single day the Jaguars have their doors open, is important. Because, like, while I do think Smoot has to earn a spot on the roster, it will be tougher for Gardeck, obviously, to even really attempt anything in terms of earning a spot on the roster due to his ACL injury and whatnot. But those are two guys who, at the very least, are above Miles Cole in terms of the pecking order and where things stand. So if you're the Jaguars, I think that the attention that they've paid to the defensive end room and defensive end position compared to the last few years has been night and day. And they do make a good point. Emmanuel Ogbah only had 5 sacks as a full-time starter last year. He played a lot of snaps, for Miami last year especially, and there wasn't a ton of production. He had 5 sacks the year before, same number as last year on significantly fewer snaps. To me, though, that is why he makes sense as a depth option. That's why, to me, I don't think they need to sign a Clowney. He has experience with Anthony Campanile. He can set the run. They have depth behind him. And he won't be expected to be in every single down contributor like he was last season in Miami. Ogbah has reduced well in a backup number 3, number 4 pass rusher role before. In Miami, if they had everybody healthy, he probably has a much better year last season in terms of sheer production. But because there were so many people injured and because they had to rely on him so much more than previously anticipated, his numbers take a hit. And I don't think it's necessarily fair to say he's a guy who needs to be upgraded from because of that. Nobody is saying he should be the starting defensive end. Nobody is saying he should get snaps over Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen. So the expectations aren't for him to be a solid starting quality player. The expectations to me should be that of, just getting ready to look at what he can do as a number 3 guy. And to me, Ogbah is a good enough number 3 edge rusher that the Jaguars shouldn't feel pressured to have to go after a guy like Clowney. In past off seasons, I probably would have said different. Last offseason and the one before, I would have said the Jaguars, the Jaguars need to give in to the pressure and go sign Jadeveon Clowney. Because they needed so badly the depth behind those guys. But they have it now. And we haven't seen Smoot play this year. We haven't seen Gardeck come back from his ACL injury. And of course, Ogbah doesn't have the next world production that will earn him, a Flavor of the Week award. But when you look deeper into his career and deeper into the context, he makes sense as a number 3 guy. So to me, the Jaguars, they don't need to go out to Clowney. The Jaguars don't need to go after another edge in general. To me, the Jaguars' edge room, as long as these guys meet the expectations, I'd say 5 sacks from Ogbah, 3.5 from Smoot. If he gets back, 5 or so sacks from Dennis Gardeck. Not if he gets back, but if he gets back to his old form, I think you can expect a good bit from that group. I don't think it's as dire of a situation as was presented here in this scenario. But I also don't see Miles Cole really factoring into things that significantly either, which appears to be a point of disagreement. But overall, I don't think that the Jaguars need to add a guy like Clowney. I think they have their number 3 edge, and they have, to me, 3 different guys who you could make an argument for as a number 3 edge. Now, if Smoot was our number 3 edge, just where he's at in his career, maybe I'd say, okay, it's time to consider a guy like Clowney. But maybe I'm high on Ogbah's game. Maybe I'm too high on his game. That's something that, of course, we will find out over the course of the next several weeks. But thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Jacksonville Jaguars Insider Podcast. Please make sure you go find us and our daily recordings over at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all other podcast platforms. You can also find us on YouTube at Sports Videos on SI.